Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yasoda Nandana Brada Jana Ranjana Yasoda Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yasoda Nandana Brajana Ranjana Yasoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Vishnu Paramatma Rajagacharya Sesudesi Bhaktivedanta Samsara Prabhupada Ki Jai Amachar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sagal Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopadasha Mukunda Radha Kunta Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadhav Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samavetta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Go Premanandi All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasnaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatchadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. In the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about different types of yoga, and he starts by telling Arjuna that he's not the body, he's the soul. And then, which is Jnana Yoga. But then he tells Arjuna to do karma yoga instead because he's not qualified for Jnana yoga. And then later on, he talks about how the goal of karma yoga and Jnana yoga are one, but nevertheless, according to qualification, then we may do one or the other. And the ultimate result, of course, is we should come to the process of bhakti. So this indicates that jnana is the process of renunciation. And, of course, Arjuna was not qualified for renunciation, even though he said he would renounce everything and beg for a living, etc. That was not really his qualification at that time. So, therefore, Krishna said, no, you just do karma yoga, but you do it without attachment to results. Nishkarma karma yoga. However, in the process of bhakti, there is not much of a differentiation as we have in karma yoga and jnana yoga between renunciation and non-renunciation. In other words, one can practice the process of bhakti in either case. So if one is a householder or grihastha, one can practice, and if one is renounced, one can practice. So it's not dependent completely on the physical situation of the person to practice bhakti yoga. Whether it's jnana yoga, more or less, one has to renounce and be very austere in order to follow that process. Whereas karma yoga, that is not indicated. So bhakti yoga, therefore, is a more flexible process in which all types of people can take part. And no one is deprived of the benefits, the ultimate goal. Of course, in some processes you can do different processes, different things, but renounced or non-renounced, etc. But you may get different results. But in bhakti, that's not so. The main thing is the devotion, and one can be in any position, and therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered that the ashramas and the varnas, etc., were all external. And that didn't give one a particular qualification for the process of bhakti. And in the process of bhakti, we don't even have to be in the varna ashram system. We can also practice, and we can get success in any case. So therefore, the process of bhakti in itself is independent of everything else. And it can be practiced by everybody in all conditions, anywhere, anytime. So that is one of the glories of bhakti. So in terms of course, humans, any human can practice, and he can practice at any age, from a very young age to the point of death. He can practice. He can practice in any ashram, brahmacharya ashram, grihastha ashram, vanaprastha ashram, or sannyasa ashram. All the varnas can practice. And even if you're not in the varnashram system, you can also practice. And you can practice anywhere. So if you're in Bharatvarsha, you can practice, but if you're in other countries, you can also practice. And, of course, we see that bhakti is practiced not only on Jambudvip with all the different varshas there, but it's practiced on the other dvipas as well. And it's also practiced in the upper planetary systems. So we go to Svargaloka and up to Brahmaloka. Then we have devotees there also. And it can be practiced in the lower planetary systems. So we see that Prahlada's in Sutala Loka, and he's practicing there. And if you go down to Patala Loka, we have a great devotee there. That is Yamaraj. He's also practicing bhakti. So from the topmost planet to the bottommost planet in the universe, bhakti is being practiced. And of course, if we go beyond the universe, we go to Shiva Loka. Shiva's a great devotee also. And then we go to the spiritual world then. Everyone's a devotee there. So anywhere in the material world, anywhere in the spiritual world, bhakti is practiced. So that's any place. And at all times, of course, from the beginning of the day, a lifetime of Brahma, in his first day, Brahma was a devotee then. And throughout the day of Brahma, of course, throughout his lifetime, the various practices take place. of bhakti, and we have different avatars coming to encourage bhakti as well, and we have the great devotees appearing to present bhakti to the people. So in every yuga, we have a yuga avatar appearing, and he presents bhakti. Of course, it's different form. In Satya Yuga, it is meditational, and then in Treta Yuga, it is through homas, and then in Dwapara Yuga, through paricharya or deity worship, and in Kali Yuga, through kirtan. But nevertheless, it's all bhakti, worship of the Supreme Lord. Through all the yugas and all the day of Brahma, throughout the life of Brahma, the process of bhakti goes on. And of course, after that also, when the universe is dissolved, still the bhakti goes on in the spiritual world continually. So in all time and in all place, by all human beings, of all ages and all ashrams and varnas, etc., the process of bhakti is there. So not to be, and it's so flexible that everyone can do it. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taking this process and presented it to the people of Kali Yuga. Of course, he's also taken a particular aspect of bhakti, and that is Nam Sankirtan, which is even more flexible. So some types of bhakti are not so flexible. So in other words, deity worship requires certain standards, and therefore not everybody can do deity worship directly. Whereas kirtan, everyone can do it. So Lord Chaitanya has presented Nam Sankirtan as the Yuga Dharma for everyone. So there's least qualification necessary for this part of Bhakti Yoga. So Lord Chaitanya illustrated this throughout his life, and we see that he preached to everyone. Of course, he started out as a grihasta, then he took sannyas, and then he went to Puri and lived there. But the majority of his followers were grihastas. So we have Advaitacharya was a grihasta, Srivas Pandit was a grihasta, and all the people of Navadvip, all the followers there were grihastas. So the majority of his followers were grihastas. There were a few brahmacharis, and of course in Puri then there were a few sannyasis also. Therefore Lord Chaitanya encouraged everyone to take to the process of bhakti. When he began his travels in South India after he left Puri to walk around and visit various places, which he did for several years. At one place, as he began his journey, then he stayed in the house of a brahmana, and then he encouraged the brahmana to chant the holy name, etc. And then when he was leaving, the brahmana also wanted to come with him. And Lord Chaitanya says, no, you stay in your house and remain a grihasta, and you chant the holy name there. So that was his instruction to him. You don't leave, you just continue what you were doing. And you add the chanting of the holy name to it. So this indicates that by taking shelter of the holy name, we can get all perfection, and other things are not a consideration, such as being a householder, not being a householder, etc. However, in the practice of the holy name, then, though everyone can practice, there are some, let's say, guidelines for making the chanting more effective. So, though everyone can do it, at the same time, we say that better if you do it under certain conditions. So, along with the holy name, then we have acquisition of knowledge, and therefore we have many books, scriptures, etc., and one should study those scriptures and read them, and one should do so in the association of devotees. So sadhu sangha is also important. As well as the process of Nam Sankirtan, then we have Shravanam and we have sadhu sangha as very important elements as well. So generally we can't separate and just say only kirtan, nothing else. Well, you can do that, but if we want to advance nicely towards the goal, then we have to carry out these other processes as well, so we can perfect the chanting of the holy name. And along with that, then we do everything which is favorable, and we reject everything that is unfavorable. So situations and places and personalities who are disturbance to bhakti, then we have to avoid all those things. And those things which are favorable we accept. And of course we have to do regularly. So one can chant the holy name, that is fine, but better than that is if we can chant constantly. And of course, if we're going to chant constantly, we should also chant pure name, Sudanam. And we get Sudanam by getting proper knowledge through Shravanam and Sadhu Sangha, as well as avoiding all the anarthas or unfavorable activities. So, if we follow this process correctly, then we can advance quickly towards the final goal. So this should be kept in mind. A particular process, if followed properly, will lead to the proper goal. And if we don't follow properly, we won't get that goal. So therefore, though chanting the holy name is a simple process, at the same time, we do have to follow the correct procedures and the rules, the favorable conditions for it. And then we end up with the proper result. Even so, it's still considered to be the easiest process and the quickest process. Other processes like yoga and jnana, very difficult to get the goal, very difficult to practice, and it takes a very long time to get the result. Whereas in bhakti, much quicker. So the main idea here is that in bhakti yoga, we get the mercy of Krishna. And this helps us in the process. This speeds up the process. Krishna is attracted to bhakti. And therefore, he encourages that process. And therefore, even we have different drawbacks and different problems, etc. He makes arrangements so that we can overcome all of this. In the other processes like jnana and karma and yoga, the Lord does not directly participate at all. He's neutral, and therefore more difficult to follow. But in the process of bhakti, we get the mercy of Krishna. This is made easier because we also have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is none other than Krishna, so therefore he's as merciful as Krishna, but he's actually more merciful. So that's his very nature. Even though he's not different from Krishna, we say his main aspect is audarja, which means most compassionate. So if we get the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is much easier to get, then this makes the process even easier. The mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is available more easily than the mercy of Krishna. So therefore, we're very fortunate to not only chant the holy name, but also chant the holy name in the sampradaya of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this makes the process very easy for us. And by getting Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, we can advance very quickly. Of course, how do we get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy? We have to, of course, have faith in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we should follow his instructions. So, actually, his instructions are very simple. If we see what he tells everyone to chant the holy name, etc. But then, of course, even he has a few qualifications or whatever. And if we look in the Shishtashtaka, his instructions, we can find there that he says that if you're going to chant the holy name, then you have to be humbler than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, and give all respect to others and not expect respect for oneself. And then you can chant the holy name. So he makes some provisions there, some restriction or whatever, under the conditions under which we chant. And if we do that, then we get the success. So Lord Chaitanya is very merciful, but we should also follow his instructions very nicely, and then that mercy becomes manifested. So the process itself is very simple, but the result is very great. But still, we do have to follow the correct procedures. So we keep in mind the scriptures, and we keep in mind the instructions of Krishna and the instructions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then we will get the proper result. We cannot divorce the result from the process. So though we may think that Prema is far off and we shouldn't think about it, we do have to think about it because it's what molds our process. The goal is defined by the process, or the process defines the goal, either way. But with the goal in mind, that perfect goal, we carry out a certain process. So the whole process of bhakti is ultimately that complete surrender to Krishna. And if we don't have that in mind in the process of bhakti, then very difficult to practice properly. So as well as the process, we have to keep the goal in mind. And we do that, and then we end up with very, very good results. And fortunately, all of this is not too complicated. Our philosophy is not complicated, and we have many attractive features, such as the pastimes of Krishna and the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in this way, everything is available to us in a very attractive package. So by following this very carefully, we can get the result. Hare Krishna.
As you were talking about giving up unfavorable association and unfavorable things and follow the process of bhakti, but somehow this unfavorable thing also comes in such attractive package these days, like this phone and the social media. And then though we are following the process of bhakti, but it is such a distraction continuously. And we justify that also thinking that okay, so we are doing some reaching, we are forwarding some messages on the WhatsApp or on Facebook status, etc. So we rationalize this that it is also for bhakti what I am doing. But then that way, like there is so much of unwanted thing which is very easily available and accessible. So what do we do about it?
Well, anything in the material world will have plus points and minus points. We can use it in the service of Krishna. That's called yukta vairagya. But the definition there is it should be constantly related to Krishna. Then it's yukta vairagya. And if it's not, then it becomes something else. So we may think that cell phones are there, so they're a big distraction nowadays. But even if we don't have, even 100 years ago or 200 years ago, they didn't have cell phones or any of the modern inventions or whatever. But still, they'll have obstacles to the bhakti in different forms. So as long as we do have the, let's say, material desires in our mind, then they can manifest through different things, whether it's a cell phone or it's just another object in the material world. So it's actually our mentality in which we use everything. So we see the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and then he was quite revolutionary because we see him there riding in a vehicle and a nice shiny car, English car. But no one dared do that before. You never see a sadhu in a car before that time, but he was just dressed up very nicely and riding in a vehicle like that. Or he used the printing press, etc. But in any case, he was completely detached from it for personal reasons. So, of course, it depends on the qualification of individual. Also, how far engagement of material things will cause attachment or not. So we also, in any case, we have to be careful. But at the same time, they can be used as long as we stick to certain principles.
Also, we find sometimes a particular item is not given. It doesn't have it in position. His mind may be thinking of it, oh, I didn't get it. Looking devotee. He will meditate, So I didn't get that.
Yeah, in any case, if we do have material attachments, it can manifest in different ways, whether we have that particular object or any other object. So it's not so much the object itself, but the inart is in the mind. However, so we can find that certain things in the material world in the modern age, they do have both sides, great potential for preaching, and also completely the opposite, depending on how we use it. So they can do both things very to an extreme. So we have to be careful of that. Yeah, but we do have to have at the same time a mentality that we want to give up the material world. If we don't have that, then we can chant forever, but nothing happens. And that's the case of the person who's got the anchor in the river and he's rowing up the river, but he doesn't go anywhere because he's too materially attached. So if we never want to give up anything, it's very, very difficult for the holy name to give a good effect.
For example, here a cloth is very dirty, and I take a nice soap. You keep on tapping the soap on the cloth, the dirt goes off.
Yeah, but it takes time. That takes a long, long time for some people. The more attachments they have and they're unwilling to give up, yes, there certainly is an effect, as even Shishupala or Kamsa or whoever, even the Aparadis, they get some effect, but it's much more gradual, and the final result, of course, is a little different, but they get purified eventually. So yes, if you have all material attachments, yes, you can advance, but because you're so material attached, your chanting will be very irregular, and therefore not much, and maybe may have offenses in it also, we don't know. So therefore, minimum effect. So if we want maximum effect, then we have to follow certain standards.
Maharaj, also you were saying that we have to think about Prema because Prema is of the whole. But then how do we understand or know that whether we are qualified to think and what exactly we have to do?
Well, we're qualified to think in one sense because it's presented in Scripture. And if we don't know anything about the goal, then why we would achieve it? Why we want to get that goal of bhakti, unless we know something about it. And if we don't have a goal, why do we have a method at all? Why are we doing bhakti if we don't have a goal in it? And then what is that goal? So we have to know something about it. So at least that is the general aspects are given in the scriptures, and that part we learn. So Rupa Goswami has given us a whole nice definition and description of it. Bhagavatam gives us a description also. So that much is there for us. We can, of course, understand it using material logic, but if we're devotees, then, of course, we can appreciate it. We can't understand it fully, but we can at least appreciate it. So for that reason, Rupa Goswami has given a whole book, the Nectar of Devotion, which is mostly about Prema. So we have to understand it to some degree in order to attain that. Otherwise, if we don't attain that, we get something else.
You see, in the PhD time, the topmost education will be people appearing for it and passing it is very few percentage. Like in Prema also, who attend Prema is very small percentage. Because the PhD candidate is very less compared to the other degrees.
Yeah, that's so. But then again, because of the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Acharyas, they presented this knowledge for everybody. So therefore, it's open and it's not difficult knowledge. You don't need a special qualification except devotion for it. And if we follow the process, then we get the results. So it's a little bit less restricted than other things because of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy and the chanting of the holy name.
Prema. Actually, usually we read and we hear and we try to practice also that the object of chanting is to ask for service and we should be service oriented. So there is a lot of focus on service, but I don't see that there is an explicit focus on developing Prema. Although it is said that service is an expression of Prema, but the objective becomes service, and then there are anarthas there, and then dealing with devotees.
Yeah, well, I think we obviously have to keep the goal in mind, and we have to understand something about it in order to get to the goal. And in the beginning process that we do have services implying our senses, there has to be also some devotion. In other words, Krishna doesn't accept the flower that you offer unless there's some devotion. It's not prema, but at least there's some devotion there. So we can't separate that devotion from our devotional acts, otherwise it becomes material.
Like Maharaj, in this case, you said Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Mahavadhyaya, but we have to follow the practice. So there seems to be some, I don't know, apparent contradiction that we have to follow the process. At the same time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is extra merciful. And if, anyway, Krishna also said follow the process. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says follow the process. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is more merciful. And when it comes to the qualification of humility, or sometimes when we do services, there is definitely some amount of a tendency to control will come. Like management especially, how management will happen without a sense of control. But we understand Krishna is supreme controller, and then we at our own level try to manage and manage without control, and then humility, one has to have humility while controlling. I mean, these are all apparently contradictory.
Well, we find even in persons like Krishna or Ramchandra, so they're absolute controllers in one sense, but at the same time they were very humble. So the same with it in the material world, we can have very expert managers or something. That doesn't make them proud necessarily. They could be, but they don't have to be. So we'll have some very humble managers who are very expert at managing or whatever, but they don't have pride at all. So it depends on one's own, let's say, level. And in bhakti, the qualification is faith. And faith itself requires some humility. Otherwise, we won't accept Krishna as the object of service. Why should I serve Krishna? So it implies automatically the process of bhakti. It must imply that. If it doesn't, then the bhakti is not really based on faith. If we're trying to be greater than Krishna in our service. So that humility always has to be there. Huh? Oh, you can chant in all sorts of moods, but if we don't have the follow Lord Chaitanya's instructions, then actually it won't be really devotional. If we're trying to get respect and pride and control over others by chanting, then it looks like we're going in the wrong direction. We're using it for material, goals. So if we follow correctly the whole process, and we're saying that we should be the servant of Krishna and try to please Krishna, and we try to enact that perfectly, then automatically we should be humbler than a blade of grass, tolerant than a tree, etc.
Maybe the finger is coming out of the chair, feedback, and I am humble and you're not. There's a drama meeting in my
Well, yeah, of course we can use the word humble, but we actually have to understand what it actually means, and then based on that, then we try to act.
Without knowing about the goal, how we can think of achieving that goal? Like Prema, we don't know anything about what is Prema.
So we have to get knowledge. Whole Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is there. The Bhagavatam is there. The whole 10th canto, which is all about Krishna, so in his pastimes in Vrindavan.
Maharaj, but we also hear that Prabhupada would discourage discussing about Radha Krishna pastimes especially. So when we talk about Prema, that is the topmost. And then simultaneously...
Well, of course, you can have Prema for in Sakya Rasa or whatever as well. But then he also wrote the Krishna book for everybody. And in the Krishna book then we have all the pastimes there. So he's presented Bhagavatam for everybody.
Shri Bhagavad Gita